The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, we're going to get started. It's 2 o'clock, so Eastern. So welcome to the What's the Best Water Level Solution for You webinar today. I hope you're all doing well, and I just want to double check that everyone can hear me. So if you could shoot me a question or type it into the chat that you can hear me, that would be super helpful. Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to go through some logistics. I do this every time just because I'd like to make sure that you can both hear me and also understand a few of the things that we do. So one of the things I want to make you aware of is that, yes, we are recording this webinar. It should last about 60 minutes, probably no more. And if you can't hear me, just in case, so just for those people who are not hearing me, make sure that you have your microphone set up, or sorry, not your microphone, that's me, your audio set up, and make sure that you're muted as well. If you have any questions, there is a question box. I have at least 8 of you that know how to use it, which is wonderful. And you can enter your questions anytime. I can't guarantee that I'll be answering them anytime, but I can guarantee that eventually somebody will follow up with an answer if you request it. Okay, so let's get started. One of the things I like to do during my webinars is to have random polls throughout. One, because I was a TA once in a long, long time ago, and engaging the audience is very important to making sure that you're still listening and not just listening to the droning of my voice. So this is a test poll. And as some of you are aware, we are headquartered in Massachusetts, where we've just gotten a couple of inches of snow today, very wet snow, but I just peeked out really quickly and it's super sunny out. So I want to know, are you a sun person or a snow person? And for this one, I think I need to make the poll. So let me put the poll up. 1 second. Oh, my goodness, I'm having some technical difficulties. Apparently I failed at the polls. So let's put this here. Sorry, adding a poll. Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. We are now asking you if you are a sun or snow person. So here's the poll. It should pop up on your screens, and if you just make a selection, it'll show me when you all have participated. So do you like sun or do you like snow? Okay, so I think this is the first time I actually got 100% results. Everyone, no, not everyone, a lot of, about exactly 2/3 like sun and 2/3 like snow. I have to admit that I am a sun person, though I'm living surrounded by snow. All right, so that was a test one. I hope that was fun for you, but in the future, they're going to be actually more relevant to you, and I look forward to having you answer as much as you did for this one. So just a little bit about me. I am the product marketing manager for water. I have had several years of experience in the marine environment. I graduated from college with a focus on marine biology, and I just noticed that somebody said they like rain, so that's an interesting one. I'd like to hear more about that, Erin. So I graduated from college and went to work for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, actually working on a project for the National Marine Fisheries, NOAA. And I also did an internship at the Moat Marine Aquarium in Florida doing shark tagging and releasing studies. And I did my master's degree in developmental shark biology at the University of Rhode Island. Then I actually moved into the water quality world, as some scientists say, to the dark side of the manufacturing side. And I have had 5 years on the analytical equipment side, and then over 2 years, almost 3 actually, with Onset. So that's enough about me. Okay, so here's our agenda. It's not a very long agenda, but there are enough topics, I promise. We're here to understand how to pick a water level logger, and these variables that you should consider as a buyer or purchaser or user of water level loggers or stations or sensors can apply to any company or any solution that you look towards. Obviously, at the end of this, I'm going to cover how Onset can answer those problems that you may have and the challenges. But these are good questions to ask or to be aware of when you're vetting out a solution for your particular application. So I thought it would be nice to go through sort of a, manufacturer agnostic, high level view of what we should think about when you are trying to monitor water level in a very specific application. And then I'm going to go through a couple of Onset customer application stories. And the reason I'm doing this is that, one, I didn't want to sit here and say, okay, we have the U20, its specs are this, and its range is this, and you all can get that from the website. But what I wanted to show you were some ideas on real-time deployments that we have done, and just to keep it sort of some of the applications are proprietary, so to keep it sort of like that, I actually sort of, and also for the sake of time, I combined a couple of applications into, some of the stories so that they aren't just one place, but they're multiple different customers. And it allows me to give you a fuller picture of what to consider. And then at the end, we are going to open it up for questions. I have a tendency to talk the full hour, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that you guys have time to ask me questions, because that's really what we're here for. Are there any questions so far? Perfect. We are going to move on. So when it comes to deploying a water level solution or to vet it out and to qualify a product for your actual needs, it's important to consider actually a variety of things. So I sat down and I made a list based off of my conversations with customers, and the list ended up sort of falling into these buckets. And so I thought it would be useful to categorize the buckets that these things fall into. But then I also started realizing that the variables within each bucket sort of communicate with each other too. So it's not like if something's in application as a variable to consider, it's not in water environment. As a matter of fact, most things are sort of overlapping. It's a crazy mesh web of variables. So what I found in my, mental exercise was that the variables can fall into application, deployment environment, or operating environment, or location, things like that. Water environment, so what the sensor is actually in, hardware, and then I sort of left this here as what else, because I have to admit that I am not an expert. I mean, I'm pretty knowledgeable, but I don't know everyone's application. So if I missed what you think is the category worth mentioning, I would love for you guys to shoot me some information on that, and I can include it for the next time I do something like this. So we are going to go on to our first, I'm sorry, I just want to confirm. Can you all hear me? I have a message that says that I can't be heard. And I want to make sure y'all can hear me. Okay. Bill, I'm not sure what's going on with your audio. You may want to make sure that you have the sound going to the right, audio is cutting in and out. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Make sure that you're sorry, reading things and talking at the same time doesn't work. Make sure that your audio is set to the speakers on your computer or the headphones that you're using. But yeah, I am going to try something while you're doing the next poll, and hopefully I can make this better for everybody. So I have a poll, as you can see here, and I'm wondering if you monitor water level in freshwater or saltwater. So let me launch this, and then I'm going to try something while you're doing that to try to fix the sound. Okay, so I want to make sure that you can hear me again. I have now called in on a phone, and I'm hoping that this works. I am going to end the poll, and let's share the results. So the majority of you are freshwater, which is not too surprising, and the very small amount that are listening also are salt. Summer Brack said, how about fresh salt and brackish? So apparently there are those of you that are monitoring and everything, and I totally understand that. And I probably should have put that on there. So thanks for that. All right. I think I fixed the sound issue, and I'm happy that you guys are helping me out with that. Now I'm going to move on to reviewing very briefly the variables. So in these next couple of slides, what I'm doing is I'm just going to go through what I came up with as the variables and make sure that that these aren't too, not bogging down with details here, because I do want to get into those application stories, because I think that's going to be a better use of our time. So for the water environment, this is the place where where the sensor is going to be deployed. And some of the variables that are really important to consider are accessibility in terms of a coral reef that I was diving in Florida, actually. And I have customers who deploy loggers in these coral reefs. They're not easy to get to, and they have to dedicate a significant amount of time and money to get there. So one of the considerations that they make is for that in terms of maintenance. Another water environment variable to consider is salinity. So if you're in salt water, you're going to likely want to have something other than something that won't rust, for instance. So stainless steel or polypropylene or titanium, for instance. Temperature, so if you're deploying these, for instance, here in a cold area, this is actually, I believe, after the winter. But as you can see, the wet and just alongside they have rebar to support it. So these are the things you'd want to consider as well, because though the water may not freeze, if you do deploy some sensors in water that does freeze, you can destroy the sensor, and that can be definitely an issue for you in terms of collecting data. Dynamic. So if you're deploying in a lake and the water is still, that's less of a concern than, for instance, if you're deploying this in a roaring river, for instance, or stream, or even in a pipe that has high volume gallons per minute moving past the sensor. Okay. So deployment and operating environment. A couple of things to consider here. Again, the accessibility. So obviously, if you're deploying your logger in the middle of the tundra and you can only get there once a year, then you're going to want to consider, for instance, the kind of maintenance that's going to be required in deploying that sensor and monitoring that water. This will also feed into your deployment methods. So stilling wells, pilings, rebar, things, deploying a product to monitor water levels. In this image, this is down in Louisiana, and the water level loggers are actually deployed on the bridge that I was standing on the pilings below. So the people here deployed the water level logger. It was a standalone logger because they just wanted it just below the water surface and not visible, so they sort of attached to the piling down there. So that's one thing to consider. They didn't need it to be in a well, and they didn't need it to be sort of attached to a rope or anything. Another thing to consider, and I'm sure you all do this because I hear this is pretty much the most consistent thing I hear from customers, and that is the security of your location. So if you're deploying your logger or station somewhere where there's a lot of public access, then it's possible that people, or likely sometimes, that people will mess with your steal it. Or apparently, and I heard this last week at Groundwater Week, they might shoot it. That was something new for me. One other thing to consider is the power. So if you have a location that's in the sunlight and you know you're going to need a solar panel, then you're all set. However, if you are in a location and you need to monitor water level and a bunch of other parameters, but you're covered by trees, that's something that you need to consider in terms of batteries versus solar panels. And then finally, exposure to extreme climate or conditions. So I have some customers, I have a bunch of customers actually that deploy in areas where hurricanes blow through, and others that deploy in places where avalanches occur. And then finally others who deploy in places where fires are, forest fires are pretty common as well. And these are all extreme conditions that need to be best for you. Are there any questions so far on the past two topics, the water environment or the operating environment? Okay, great. So we will continue on. Other variables to consider, and I want to actually acknowledge the fact that a lot of these things are pretty much commonplace things to consider, as well as something that you wouldn't even think to buy something without considering in terms of a monitoring solution for your needs. But sometimes there are certain things that you might overlook or you haven't thought about, and it's important to sort of have these little reminders sometimes, because we can be experts, but it's been a while since we've thought about different applications for instance. I hope you're seeing a trend. The accessibility here is kind of like all throughout. It's ubiquitous, the variables to consider. It always falls down to maintenance, and that always relates back to things like why would you need it in terms of the water environment, why would you need it in terms of the outdoor environment, and in this case, how do those two environments affect the hardware for maintenance, and what maintenance tools do you need included with your solution. So like, for instance, if you're deploying this, a water level station in a difficult to reach place, for instance, then you may not want to have a vented cable, because then you have to maintain the desiccant in that, and you have to make sure that no water gets in there, whereas a non-vented cable attached to a sensor with a barometric pressure compensation sensor somewhere nearby would actually prevent. And then again, in that same application of being in the middle of nowhere, you want to consider communications. So do you need cellular? If you do need remote communications, do you need Iridium or some other satellite? I'd like to know, and maybe you can just pop this into the questions if you're willing to, but I'd like to know how many of you are using satellite versus cellular for remote applications. Because it's really it's an interesting conversation. I've heard both sides of the story. But if you need cellular, but you don't have cellular coverage, and you can't afford, for instance, satellite, you sort of have no choice. But we also have some options at Onset, at least, that you can use Wi-Fi or Ethernet. So again, there's so many different things that you can choose that, you know, that can affect, just so simply can affect the one product versus the other, that this is always an important thing to keep in mind, and that is communication. Cool. Thanks, guys, for answering that. Okay, another thing in terms of accessibility is whether you want to have a cable or no cable. If it's easily accessible and you, for instance, are dropping this into a pond or a lake and you want to make sure that you can easily grab it without having to sort of dive down to get it, so maybe having a cable makes sense. Or maybe you don't want it to be visible, so you hide it with having no cable and you have a standalone water level logger and sensor. Obviously, specifications are always something that's considered first and foremost for customers, understanding the accuracy and the range of the water level sensor, as well as the resolution sometimes, or a lot of times. The power options, so this does go back to whether you have solar available or AC input, or if you are able to get to the site easily enough that you can change batteries out. Again, for the wet water environment, it's about saltwater versus freshwater. So that's a #1 question that's usually asked in terms of qualifying our loggers for a specific application. But it's also like the other wetted materials and the other things that are in the water. So wastewater is water, but raw wastewater is nasty water. And sometimes there are things in that raw wastewater, especially if it's like chemical wastewater, that can interact with some of the other wetted materials in the logger or the sensor. And then finally, accessories. So for the hardware, if you are just monitoring water level, then you're good to consider most of these variables that I've mentioned so far, and just those. But if you need to monitor water level in addition to maybe MET data, so meteorological data, you want to consider what's the most efficient, I guess, solution that would work for monitoring the water level as well. And then when you choose your solution, making sure that you understand fully what the required accessories are. So if you go for a station that monitors, that's a telemetric station that monitors water level as well as MET data, make sure you understand that you are going to have better power. So maybe a solar panel in addition, unless it's built in, like the logger shown here, which is our RX 2100. Or maybe you have to consider the tripod or the other sensors, or for water level to be compensated, if you're not using the vented cable, again, you need a barometric pressure sensor if there's not a station nearby that you can use. So these are definitely things to make sure that you're clear on before purchasing, because having the required accessories in place before you receive your order is probably better, so that you're not out in the field deploying this and then find that you don't have the necessary items. Okay, so the last variable that I'm going to cover here is the application. And what I meant by application is basically, what is the environment, the actual application? Like, what kind of water are you monitoring? And sometimes why? So these actually fell into two subgroups. And what I found was that they fell into environmental, which is a pretty obvious one. So groundwater, surface water, fresh, brackish, marine. This is actually an estuary in Massachusetts, Coit, part of the National Estuaries project. And considering here, this is salt water, so a logger deployed here, you probably wouldn't want it to be either titanium or the polypropylene, for instance. And then there are also are interesting in that they're not the everyday. We know people are monitoring water level for groundwater and water level and flow for surface waters, but things that we are also, aware of, and maybe some of you are here representing, are things like irrigation systems and cisterns or tanks, water retention tanks, fish farms. I was in graduate school and I was doing shark husbandry, and our system actually had it in line, but knowing when the water level went down and having alarms for that was super crucial, because my young sharks would have not survived very well with no water. Ponds, and for instance on golf courses or residential lakes, they are definitely monitoring water level here, and what are the different requirements involved with that. So with lakes, for instance, residential lakes, they have a bunch of stakeholders that are part of, and they're contributing to this monitoring, and they want to know what's going on. And even mines too. So mine drainage is kind of gross. Yep, another one is stormwater systems. So yeah, again, this is not actually a complete list. This was, I should have put stormwater systems on there though. That's a good one, Mike. And this is the Bellagio. I happen to be at Groundwater Week, and if anyone here was also at Groundwater Week last week, I just thought it would be nice to take a picture of that. And that is a pretty massive holding tank, I guess, of water. They probably monitor it in line, but it was just kind of a fun picture to show for potential applications of man-made water systems. Okay. So, next poll. I'm wondering, which HOBOs have you used? This is the U20L. We also have the U20, which is stainless steel and titanium. It has a little bit better accuracy than this one. This is our MX2001 Bluetooth water level logger. This is the new RX2100 water level station, micro water level station. And this is our RX3000. And we've just added the capability of using a complete Onset solution to monitor water level with a water level module that plugs into one of the module slots. So those are the ones that I have come up with. So let me just start that one for you. If you haven't used any of them, then just, you don't have to answer, because I should have put that in as well. But I think, I'm hoping at least most of you have used these. looks like everyone has voted. And I'm not actually surprised with the results because the U20 has been out for quite some time. The U20 and U20L is one of our customers' favorites even to today. The MX2001 is also one of our customer favorites. And we have just launched this guy, so I did just get a webinar on that, and I'm considering that people who bought that probably already made these decisions. And then the RX3000, that's a newish station or newish option. It's always still that we offered a third-party sensor, but now we've completed that package by having our own sensor. So interesting results. Thanks, guys. I'm going to take a pause real quick. If there are any questions on what we covered in terms of the variables, I'd love to answer those right now because I'm about to move on to the blended customer application. Oh, I love it. Billy, it's interesting. So Billy said that he uses the U20, but he has used a modified version of one of our other products. That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. I love how our customers do this. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to our application stories. Yeah. So as I said, I'm a shark biologist, and I am sort of really excited about this application because it's very near and dear to my heart. The customer is also a shark biologist, and no, it is not I. And they are monitoring nursery grounds in remote tropical waters as background data for population studies. So in addition to monitoring depth, in this case, the customer was monitoring conductivity as well as temperature. And these are little baby black tip sharks. So let's see. What were the challenges faced by this person? That picture is not where the loggers were deployed, but it gives you an idea of the environment where these could have been deployed. The location is a nursery ground, and it's only accessible or only visited twice a year. So the customer actually rents a boat, pays money to take his team and his product out there, and visits it every 6 months. So if anything goes wrong with loggers or they get taken, for instance, that's a big chunk of data missing. So in addition to having local recreational and fishery activity, there definitely is vandalism that's possible at the location. So the customer definitely needs to make sure that there's security for the loggers that he purchases. There's no cellular, but he didn't have a need for telemetry. And occasionally, there may or may like a hurricane or a typhoon that blows through and can affect the deployment. So what was the answer? The customer purchased U20Ls, actually, because it's saltwater, and the Ls are polypropylene. They have an optic to USB configuration and offload, which allows for the logger to be easily concealed using this image here of the cinder block with a PVC pipe that's screened, essentially. And yeah, this allowed him to deploy it under the water, use GPS location to find it, and it was pretty well hidden, but as you know, in tropical waters, very often the water is very clear. So there were some difficulties there, but also he wanted to interrupt the ground as low as the least amount possible. So the benefit of the optic to USB configuration and offload is that he was also doing conductivity, and Onset has RU24-002-C conductivity logger for saltwater monitoring. And so he could deploy these side by side and have them logging at the same intervals and basically offload the data together and compare them in our software, which is HOBO Pro software. So in this case, the customer would deploy also the barometric pressure logger, which is the same. He would use the U20L. and hide these in the trees nearby so that the barrel pressure nearby is captured alongside of the water pressure. And this allows the customer to actually achieve water level by actually entering a reference level as well. So this makes it very simple by using two of our U20Ls, Pro, and compensate barometric pressure. The other awesome thing for this application was the self-contained non-vented design that allowed for the long maintenance intervals. So the logger could basically be deployed and left for as long as needed because no desiccant needed to be monitored, and fouling was very low because of where it was deployed. Other features of this logger that are good to consider as well are the ceramic sensor, which can withstand freezing and is a little bit more durable. These standalone loggers currently require a shuttle or a base station. Onset has a waterproof shuttle that can go underwater, and then they have a base station that connects directly to your computer, so this one is more likely to be used where it can't get wet. But other than the U20L, we have U20, and so if a NIST certification or higher accuracy is required, the options include the U20. There are options for the U20 as well, which is stainless steel or titanium and has a little bit better accuracy. Are there any questions about the U20s? What about power? Good question. These have an internal battery. It is not user replaceable. And how long that battery will last depends on the logging interval and how many times it's connected for offloading or configuring, and the temperature surrounding it. Whitney, your question says regarding the freezing -30 C temp. Is that for the U20s or is that for the for another logger? For the sensor. For the sensor itself, the ceramic sensor. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think -30 is. I don't know. I'd have to check on that or think on it for a second. I'll get back to you on that. Thanks for asking that question. All right, any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to another customer story. This is a customer that is an ecosystem restoration and environmental consulting firm that is currently trying to create a baseline understanding of the hydrology at a test site prior to the construction of a spreader swale to improve drainage of upstream water through the wetland. So the spreader swale is being built by another agency to improve water quality from inland waters. And currently these waters are diverted down canals with direct deposit into surrounding estuaries that are causing water quality issues. So some of the challenges that are being faced by this customer include most likely the location. Most obviously the location. It's easily accessible. It is a state park, so it's accessible, but it is also 29,000 acres spread out. The wet season can bring feet of water, and also sometimes there's dense flora. So I went down to access customer recently, and I have some fun things to tell you. But being a state park, the wells can actually be accessed by, I hope you enjoy my word, miscreants. These people, for instance, like to throw cans everywhere, and could potentially vandalize the wells in the station. But also wildlife can affect the wells as well. So let me just show you what these are. This is how the wells are accessed. One of the ways the wells can be accessed with a swamp buggy. And this is an example of how dense it can be. So this picture actually, I was following the customer and I wasn't that far behind, but I couldn't find them. They were only a couple of feet in front of me, but this is how thick it was. And then again, we had some wildlife tracks being shown. But also, when we approached one of the wells, of the 60 wells that there are, we found that it had been knocked over potentially by wildlife, which is kind of a bummer because when you're monitoring water, well, which is a major bummer, but when you're monitoring water level, you need the sensor to stay in the same place in order to accurately report the level. So this was a big bummer because it needed to be replaced, and the data that it had been logging were no longer usable. And really quickly, for the U20, it just occurred to me, yes, Whitney. So below that, and it probably isn't the right choice for you, but there are some others potentially. Okay, so for this customer, the solution was our MX2001 Bluetooth Low Energy HOBO Direct Read Water Level Logger. A mouthful. Customer did not need telemetry, though they didn't have reliable cellular throughout the location. And with the Bluetooth configuration, with Bluetooth, the configuration offloads were convenient because if you're within direct line of sight of the well up to 30 meters, you can download those data without even removing it, and that helps with making sure your reference level stays the same if you've used one. In addition to the water level sensor, which is here, barometric pressure sensor behind this Vortex vent, and this allows for the barometric pressure to be monitored at the same time as the water level, the water pressure, which means that when you connect to the logger, if you have water level activated with a water level reference, you actually can get the water level directly without having to do any post-processing. So that's a really cool feature because you can spot check, for instance, when you're out in the middle of 29,000 acres and trying to figure out if it's logging the data. Other features that are important in terms of considerations are that this is a standalone water level and temperature logger, which means it only does water level and temperature. This is a non-vented cable and a ceramic sensor. So both of these mean that it's low maintenance and reliable. The ceramic sensor, in this case, it doesn't matter that it can be frozen, but as you can see, but again, this ceramic sensor can withstand freezing temperatures. Also, it's really nice because it has user replaceable batteries. So that's a nice feature for maintenance and saving yourself time in terms of having to send it back in to our tech support, for instance. And then the sensors can come as well in stainless steel or in titanium. Oh, I don't know why I did that to myself. Are there any questions about this application story? And I hope this goes to show that I'm willing to come learn about any application, even in the middle of 106 heat index, 29,000 acres on a swamp buggy. Which model? This model is Bluetooth water level logger. Okay. Oh, I hate spiders. Another application story, we have an American water district, and their application is monitor a well that's used to comply with local conservation requirements in a small town. So they have a well that's adjacent to a vernal pool, and there's concern by local conservation groups that the well will cause drawdown of that vernal pool. So just as a reminder, a vernal pool or pond is a seasonal pond or pool that can provide habitat for very specific plants and animals like amphibians and insects. One of the key features is that, except for, I think, killifish, these ponds don't have predator fish in them. So it allows these species to sort of have nursery grounds as well. And so as you can see here, this is the American toad egg. But there are some really cool animals that are found in these vernal ponds that are very specific to vernal ponds. So let's see. I'm going to tell you what these are in case you want to know. This is an Agassiz clam shrimp, six-spotted spider, American toad egg, spotted salamander, and a wood frog. And as an FYI, these are all from the Vernal Pool Association. So if you happen to study these or be involved with them or want to find out more, this is a really cool website that I found. So you can go learn about vernal pools. Okay, some of the challenges that were experienced. The site is easily accessible, being that it's in a town, but it within a very public location. So customers the customer was concerned about people messing with their station. So they preferred to have the station or logger deployed in a lockbox to keep the vandals from messing with it. They also wanted to have real-time alarms in order to have a quick response to the drawdown and to make sure that they aren't overusing the well. They do experience cold temperatures, but it never falls below 0 Fahrenheit. So that was something that was being considered at the time of qualification, but didn't have any issues in terms of the two options they were given. And then the monitoring is not permanent. And this is actually something that I'm hearing a lot with customers, that when they purchase the solution from us one time forever, it's likely that that will be used in the future. So that's something that that people should consider as well in terms of what they should look into for products and also what we should recommend to the customer. So what they ended up choosing was the RX2104. So we have just launched these two products, the RX2103 and the RX2104. The 03 is battery operated, and the 04 is, has this integrated solar panel that you can see. These are the HOBO Micro RX water level stations. And having the solar panel here, actually the solar panel that's integrated and comes with it can be unplugged, and the station can actually be hidden inside of a lockbox with an external solar panel that can power the station. It's small, it's about half of an 8.5 by 11. It's cellular enabled and can upload data directly to the HOBO cloud, so that also allows for the real-time alarms for water levels. And one of the cool things is that usually with telemetric stations, what you're going to have is you set an alarm, and then once the measurement is taken, it's sent up to the cloud. The cloud, post-processes it, so it's software in the cloud, and then it shoots it back down to the station if there is an error, and that error is then, not an error, I'm sorry, an alarm, and that alarm is then triggered and sent out over the cellular station. So this is not necessarily a super long process, but it is a process that that can take some time and can actually cause some problems. So one of the very cool things about this station is that it has essentially real-time alarms for water level and water flow and rainfall accumulation, actually. In this case, they were worried about the water level. And when I say basically real-time alarms, at the time of measurement, if there's a reference water level entered, because it has an integrated barometric pressure sensor and because it knows the reference water level, it will immediately trigger an alarm without having to shoot it up to the cloud first. So sometimes it is as crucial as that. In this case, it wasn't that crucial, but it was a feature that the customer really enjoyed having as an option. And so, as I said, it does have an integrated barometric pressure sensor as part of the station. So when you purchase it, you're getting the water level sensor, the station with integrated solar panel, and integrated barometric pressure. So that's actually kind of an all-in-one little package for telemetric water level monitoring, so remote water level monitoring. In addition, I hope you're seeing a theme here as well. In addition to the features mentioned, the sensor is the ceramic sensor. As a matter of fact, this sensor happens to be the same sensor that is available last water level walker we talked about. The cables are customizable in terms of length, which can help with concealing the station. So if you have a low well and you don't want it to be obvious, you can actually hide the station off a little bit and have the cable allow you to have it at a certain distance away. Also, there are inside of this 5 smart sensor ports for adding additional environmental parameters that include things like soil moisture and meteorological data, wind, rain. Are there any questions about this solution? I promise we have one more. Okay, cool. So this one was a water authority that was monitoring storm events for flood prevention. Not necessarily like the flooding that occurs where it covers an entire city, but just enough flood interactions with the environment around it and the residential properties and people in general trying to drive through flooding that isn't meant to be driven through. So they wanted to monitor these storm events for flood prevention, which, flood, I guess, response. So they needed to monitor multiple parameters other than water level. And they indicated that it could get pretty cold where they are. So the parameters included water level, temperature, rainfall accumulation, wind speed, gust direction, temperature, barometric pressure. But since it could get very cold, well, I'll get into that in a minute. They also really needed to have those fast alarms to accommodate a rapid response. So they really valued the option of having station-side alarms in this case. This is an example of an area that could flood. This happens to be not where the customer was. This is my own application, but I just wanted to show you. This is a river that I have a water level sensor deployed in, and I was monitoring other parameters, but was able to capture sort of a massive increase in water level just because I had water levels deployed as well. And this is a small culvert over here. It goes under a road, and it was struggling to keep up with the flow. So the station needs to be located under a little bit of trees, like my station, but the user wanted to monitor rainfall and wind, and that's hard to do when you're protected by trees. So they also wanted to monitor multiple parameters at one time, and they needed a power source that could withstand getting cold and could withstand the intervals that they were choosing to use, as well as the number of sensors that they were using. So they ended up choosing the RX3004, which is our new 4G telemetry unit station that has several inputs for smart sensors as well as potential inputs for analog sensors, which was something they enjoyed because they could modify it for future uses if needed. The water level sensor module is now a new product that we are offering with the RX3, or as an add-on for the RX3000, and that module has integrated barometric pressure sensor, so the customer no longer do any post-processing because the HOBO Link software will actually do that for them. It also has the potential for having a solar panel integrated with it, as well as AC power, or, it can do AC power or battery power or a solar panel. And mine here is underneath a bunch of trees, so I chose a pretty large solar panel to keep it powered. The other reason they chose this station was because it also offered HOBONet, which is our wireless sensor network. And in this case, they were using it for the rain wireless sensor and the wind wireless sensor. We do offer other parameters for the wireless sensor network, but having this option allowed them to do the water level near the location and then collect rain and wind in an open area that was nearby. And this is much better. And they also had the real-time alarms for water level. And in this case, they also wanted to know flow. And HOBO now has calculations for flow when you give it the correct dimensions of, for instance, a flume, a weir, or a stage discharge relationship. Other than that, it has an LCD display for easy field deployment, and the cloud-based data means you can access it through HOBO, which means even when an alarm is not triggered, you can still access the data up until the last connection to view in real time, essentially. Are there any questions about this one? Okay. So, oh, that got distorted. So, are there any questions in general about what we've covered so far? I'm going to click here too. And while you're asking those, I'm going to post up one more poll. It's really just to see if you would like someone to contact you for follow-up on any of what we've discussed. So let's see. Jeffrey, which logger are you asking is saltwater tolerant? The RX3000, yes. It can come with titanium or with a titanium or stainless steel. So titanium would probably be my suggestion for you if it's saltwater. Bud would like to know if he can use a titanium sensor in freshwater. The answer is I'm sure you can. But if there's a reason, since maybe you already have it, I don't know. But the MX2001 does come with stainless steel or titanium, and the stainless steel should be fine in freshwater unless you know something about your particular application. Okay. Okay, so yeah, if you would like the flexibility to monitor different water types, then the titanium might be your best solution. Renee asked if we make sensors for pollutants like nitrogen. At this point, we do not. We don't do nitrogen or phosphorus. The only water quality that we do at this point is dissolved oxygen, pH, and conductivity. So that's a good question. David asked if the solar panel needs to be adjusted during the year to track the different sun positions. I mean, I guess you could, it depends on where you are. Like if you're up north very far or down south very far, I imagine you might have to do that. Mine that's deployed in Massachusetts, I have had it in the same position year round under those trees, and it's done pretty well. But again, it's kind of big. Rick asked if the sensors can be used to measure wave height in estuaries. That's a good question. I'm going to say probably not, because to capture a wave, you probably need sub-hertz intervals, and so far right now we don't have that option. But let me know if I misunderstood that one. Another question about if the sensors can be affected by long-term exposure to the sediment. It's possible. So the loggers have an opening that should be kept fairly clean so that it can actually measure that pressure, but they don't get fouled as easily, I believe. Bud was asking if we have any guides for setting up stations. Yes, we have a bunch of resources online in our knowledge base. That's actually a really good question, and I'm glad you asked because I intended to show you guys that as well. So for those of you that are still here, I am going to pull that up and share. So yeah, we do have some knowledge base articles related to that. I would also recommend that you definitely contact us as well. So let's share. Okay, I can't show it, but if you go to our homepage, which is onsetcomps.com, there are a couple words at the top to the right of the Onset logo, and it says resources. All right, let's see if there are any questions. Without pinching the vent tube, there is no vent tube on those, a bit in order to bring the sensor position higher instead of purchasing a new cable. Yeah. So the answer is that first that it is not there are no vent tubes, which is great because then you don't have to worry about pinching it. And you can actually do that. We have sort of recommendations on that as well. You could coil it if you wanted, but if you have it inside of a well, you could also wrap it around a stick. I don't think I'm going to explain this very well without showing you the pictures, but there is an application note on this, and I'd be happy to have someone follow up with that for you so that you can have that information. I'm going to send to you guys a link to that paper. Okay, I hope you got it. Are there any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed the discussion, and if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you for your time. I hope those of you who are up north with me in New England are staying safe in the snow, and those down south, I'm pretty jealous of you for staying warm in the sun. Have a great day, everybody.